Alfa Romeo has created a new motor for the 4C, which has a maximum torque of 258 foot-pounds. Despite its power, it weighs only 295 pounds because it's made almost entirely of aluminum. Although Alfa Romeo makes the engine block out of aluminum, the piston liners are forged from a special cast iron. The piston liners may start out with a thickness of 2 millimeters, but the finish machining process will reduce them by 50% to just 1 millimeter. When installed and finished, they're so thin you can barely tell they're there. Installing the liners is an extremely delicate operation. First, a robot removes an engine block from an oven. The robot then places the piston liners partway inside the other block. Because this block has just emerged from the oven, the aluminum has expanded, allowing the liners to slide in easily. Jets of compressed air prevent the liners from touching and potentially scratching the walls of the liner openings. Next, a second machine picks them up, aligns them perfectly, and sinks them into position. The robot will then transfer the engine block back to the oven for the cooling process. As it cools off, the aluminum will contract around the cast iron liners. When the oven door opens again, the robot places the finished block inside. It will move through different zones inside the oven, cooling off slowly and evenly. This important step prevents deformation or cracking. Once the engine block is cooled and contracted around the piston liners, they can be finished. A device called the honing machine goes to work. The machining done here is so precise that engineers measure the tolerance in microns. A horizontal machining tool polishes the crankshaft housing. Water mixed with the liquid called cutting fluid helps the finishing machines meet the parameters required by the engineers. Crankshaft is a key element of the new 4C engine. It has 8 counterweights, allowing the engine to rev up to a higher RPM with fewer vibrations. Technicians must ensure that those 8 counterweights are perfectly balanced. They use a computerized system to monitor its movement. Having located the imbalances, technicians program a special tool to drill holes in the counterweights. The location, depth, and number of holes must be determined with perfect accuracy. Once fully balanced, the crankshaft then moves to a quality control station, where a series of instruments measure every aspect of its geometry. Technicians now prepare to install the crankshaft in the engine block. First, an automated camera surveys the crankshaft to make sure all the half bearings and thrust bearings are in place. Next, a robotic arm runs a bead of black sealant around the perimeter of the bottom part of the block. Once the sealant is in place, the top part of the aluminum block goes on. Technicians will then bolt it in position. It's now time to install the pistons. The engine block arrives at this station with the crankshaft already in position and the 4 pistons ready to go. A robot picks up the first 2 pistons and places them inside the liners. A second robot rotates the crankshaft so that it's in the correct position. The robot picks up the remaining pistons and installs them. The second robot ensures that the piston's connecting rods are properly attached to the crankshaft. At the next station on the assembly line, robotic cranes slide along an overhead track and lower a component called the cylinder head on top of the engine. The cylinder head closes into pistons, forming the internal combustion chamber. This is the final step in building the 4C engine. It's now time for a thorough quality control test of the engine. Technicians put the 4C motor through its paces. As the engine runs, they keep an eye on their gauges as they measure 30 different parameters, including power, pressure, and RPMs. As the engine revs, the turbo gets so hot it begins to glow. Although most of the engine is aluminum, the turbocharger is steel. It must endure temperatures as high as 1870 degrees Fahrenheit. The manufacturing process is complete, and this Alfa Romeo 4C is ready for action. Unbelievably, it weighs less than 2,000 pounds. Capable of revving up to 6,500 RPMs, this supercar can accelerate from 0 to 60 in just 4.5 seconds. A 6-speed gearbox allows for fast, precise control. And like all modern Alfa Romeos, it has something called a DNA selector. This gives drivers the choice of 7 different performance modes, including natural, all-weather, dynamic, and race.